And welcome to a little bit of a different video this time for you. A bit of a midweek bonus. I've just come out of teaching a class and I want to share some of those insights with you. I've just taught a class and one of our projects for this year is the chart of Meghan Markle. Now, she's someone I'm sure that you all know. She's rather controversial. Some people really like her, some people do not. But she has a very, very interesting chart to work with. And she's been on the scene now for pushing 10 years. So this gives us enough sort of public data and dates where we can look at events, we can look at happenings in her life and start to develop some astrological signatures in the way that planets work out for her. I first started speaking about Meghan Markle's chart that I recall. I might have done some with students, but it was when I spoke at the NORWAC conference in Seattle in 2019. And I was doing her Fidaria cycles. And I made some comments and, kind of made it clear that I wasn't a fan, which I'm not. And I wasn't very popular for saying that because, at the time, she was America's sweetheart and she was going to tear down the patriarchy. Anyway, whatever you think of her, it doesn't matter. We're here for the astrology, and my prediction is she is going to have a very, very difficult 18, bit over, probably from now, 12 to 18-month period, particularly once Saturn settles in Aries. So she's had a few mishaps and missteps. I mean, that's pretty common for her, but um, she's sort of back in the news for no good reasons, to my knowledge, at this point in time. If you disagree, if you have other thoughts or perspectives, please leave it in the comments. This is, not my personal opinions or anything. This is to try and share some knowledge in the respect of how we can get sort of predictive information about people and utilizing the tools of astrology, which is why I'm sure you're all here. So this is just a bonus midweek video. I'll have my regular podcast come out on Friday, and then I hope to finish recording my 2026 horoscope videos for you all. So if you're not yet subscribed, do so, and then you'll get those notifications when those horoscopes come out. So I'm really looking forward to getting those completed for you. Anyway, so let's get started. We're just going to have a quick look at Meghan's chart. It is super interesting. That being said, though, and I think this is a good point to keep in mind with astrologers, we never know how many charts we actually read where the birth data is accurate. And I have heard reports that there are some variations around Meghan's age, and we're not even sure if she is this age, which would be what, 44. There are some people that have even accused her as being a fair bit older than that. Who knows, whatever. But as astrologers, we just take what the data we know, and I would suspect it's pretty accurate given the 10 years of history and even a little bit beyond that I've done with her Fidaria cycles. So anyway, let's get to it. So the first thing that I think most people's eye would draw to with this chart is the fact that she's got a pretty spectacular stellium there in the fourth house. Spectacular because there is the ruler of the ascendant. So the ascendant is 24 Cancer, and that moon is at 4 Libra. And it is making a very swift applying conjunction to an exalted planet. Yes, it's Saturn, but Saturn also happens to rule her descendant, her seventh house of partnership and marriage. And as far as exaltations go, I don't think you get much more exalted than meeting and marrying a prince. Now, we can also see that Jupiter has just passed the conjunction with Saturn. So we've got this tight configuration of the moon, her ascendant ruler, an exalted planet, which happens to be her husband ruler in this case, along with Jupiter. So it's kind of a prince, very princely energy. I guess we don't really get much more of an exalted example than marrying royalty. So there's that. And of course, there's the IC there, and Pluto's in the mix too. Now, we can also see that Megan has the sun in Leo. So Leo is the sign where the sun is most happy, so it's at home. It's a night chart though, so there's a little bit of, it's not the most potent position the sun can be. It's a little bit maybe a hungry lion in the second house. One of the ways that I see the second house sun placement is a bit like an aircraft. It uses so much fuel, so much energy, and so much power to get itself off the tarmac, raise up to an altitude, to get above the horizon, and then kind of, at that cruising altitude. So I often find that people who have the sun in the second house are very focused on survival. Now, of course, the sign, the aspects will determine what type of survival. Yes, it's money. So, of course, that's going to be part of it. That's part of it for everyone. Let's be real. But when we're talking about the sun in Leo, we've got Mercury there, which is combust, and we've also got the North Node. So that's a very hungry sun. It's ravenous. It's got a lot of desire, a lot of ambition, and wants that visibility and to be the center of things, which is natural for Leo. Now, we can also see the midheaven is in Aries. Now, the sun is the sign that, well, Aries is exalted in, the sun is exalted, I should say, in Aries. So there is a strong connection that the midheaven being Aries, being exalted by that sun in Leo, and it also forms a trine, a very flowing, very tight, all but exact trine there. So there is maybe this hunger to get above that horizon, so to speak, that hunger for fame, that hunger for fortune, the hunger to be sort of seen and recognized. Now, we've also got this probably one of her problem planets for sure is Mars in Cancer. Now, Mars is traditionally known as being in fall in Cancer. And so you'll notice that Mars also forms that square to the midheaven. And so history sort of proves that many of her actions, her erraticness, her sort of instability, jumping from one thing to the next, very sort of cardinal energy, kind of gets her undone. There's also a lot of speculation about, narcissism and all sorts of things with her. Whether that's true or not, um, yeah, that's for your opinion. But yeah, Mars does kind of throw that proverbial spanner in the works, no doubt about it. So we also can see that Venus is also in a position of detriment there. No, it's in fall, sorry, rather, at 13 degrees of Virgo. And Venus is the planet that rules this stellium. So I'm not going to go too much deeper into the natal chart. What I really wanted to do was just to give you some of the big hits to give you a little bit of an idea of her natal chart, particularly if you've not seen it before. Now, what I want to do is bring up some secondary progressions. Secondary progressions are one of my favorite astrological techniques. And for some reason, my solar fire hasn't saved these the way that I wanted to. So just excuse me for a moment while I start clicking back through some of the years and we can start to have a look at some of the history of Meghan Markle. So let's share the screen, and I've got her transits and progressions for mid 2016. Now, mid 2016 is reportedly when Meghan and Harry first met. So I think it might have been Wimbledon or some nightclub or what have you, but it was said, according to the internet, it was July of 2016. So if you've not seen a chart like this before, it's a lot of hieroglyphics, I know. Essentially, what we've got is the natal chart is on the inside. Her secondary progressions are in the center wheel, and on the outside are the transits of that particular period of time. So tri-wheels are not something that I utilize a great deal, but they're very helpful when we're looking back in time. So what we essentially want to do is start to understand how these three layers of technique are working with each other. And we're essentially just like aspects, just like the moving sky, just like horoscopes, we are essentially taking the natal chart, which is eternal for an individual, how the secondary progressions, how the technique of a day for a year progresses through time. And some of the expressions or the metaphors used for this is that the natal chart is like a gun. The secondary progressions load the chambers with bullets, and then the transits fire the trigger. And there's obviously many different techniques you can use, but if you can get those three things working quite well, you've got that rule of three, which is really important in astrology. Um, Obviously, you can use other techniques as well, whatever techniques you have, whichever ones you like. So, what we can see in this configuration with these three charts superimposed upon each other is something actually pretty nice. And we can see here that the North Node, well, we've had the Sun pass over Venus. That's kind of been and gone if you're not that familiar with secondary progressions. So I'm pretty strict with these things. And, that it happened for her 2 years prior, so it's barely a big deal at this point in time. Maybe she had someone else interesting she was dating at the time. Don't know, can't remember now. But we have the North Node on Venus. That is a wonderful signature for a relationship, either wanting a relationship or some fast forward developments regarding relationships. That's what Venus can often signify in the birth chart. So, what we can say with this is that the energy of Venus being the ruler of all of this stuff, it's the ruler of the planet that her ascendant ruler sits in. So, we'd call that the dispositor. It's where her husband can be found, and a strong benefic in her birth chart. So we've got that configurations all being turned on, amplified, and energized. And just to add a little bit more, elevation, expansion, and possibility, we've got not Venus, sorry, Jupiter there too. So there's some really, really nice energy. If you're having the North Node, Jupiter, activating your Venus, that is going to be a really wonderful time for you. And of course, Jupiter North Node transits don't happen every day. So what you can also what you can also see when Harry met Megxit was that transiting Saturn. So you could almost see this as a transiting husband, if you like, because that's the planet that rules her seventh house, is literally trining her sun. So her sense of identity, who she is, and who she's going to become essentially. Now, we've already identified that the sun trines the midheaven, and this transiting Saturn also trines the midheaven. So we've got this connection here where sort of stars are aligning, this grand fire trine happening between the transiting Saturn is kind of creating this third leg to this trine. And we know that her marriage to Harry has brought her a lot of fame, a lot of fortune, and everything in between. Now, you might also be looking at the chart and thinking, oh, yeah, but that Neptune is pretty close to opposing her natal Venus. It hadn't actually hit at this point, if my memory serves me correctly, but we can start to see that a fairy tale signature is certainly building. I think Neptune stationed retrograde at 12 degrees, so um, it wasn't an exact opposition by that stage. So, there's other signatures there as well. Secondary progressions are very important when it comes to timing techniques. If you're not very clued in to how they work, on my website there is a webinar you can download that's called an Introduction to Secondary Progressions. So that will certainly guide you through some key how-tos and how to work with them because they are fantastic. Now we can see that her progressed Venus, even though natally in Virgo, it isn't the best Venus on paper, but here at 24 degrees of Libra, not only is Venus in Libra, her home sign, but it's also conjunct a fixed star called Speaker. Now, the fixed star Speaker, hands down, without question, as far as I'm concerned, is so much better than Regulus. I mean, Regulus gets all the glory, but Speaker is a star of protection, of benevolence that endures. If I can put the star V of Speaker in a wedding chart, I will put it there. It is that good. It's a really, really beautiful star. Now, it we can also see that transiting Uranus just happens to be opposing this. So we could maybe see that there's a sudden turn in fortune or a sudden turnaround, a sudden event happening around Venusian, like emerging Venusian topics for her. We can also see that Mars is conjoined her natal Uranus. And so this is a more subtle signature. It's a 1 in every 2 year signature. So not the biggest thing, but when this is the time where you meet your future husband that just happens to be a prince, we can see that Mars could symbolize a man in her fifth house. They meet suddenly, we've got that Uranus, the suddenness, romance, infatuation, and all of those Scorpio good things. So that is that. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the astrology when they met. So that was said to be in July of 2016. Now, if we fast forward, oops, not that far. So if we fast forward all of these charts, obviously the natal chart doesn't move, but if we go back to the 27th of November 2017, this is when the engagement is announced. So you might recall, or if you Googled it, it might jog your memory. They're standing out on, a staircase, outdoor steps or something like that, and they're making their announcement of their engagement to the media. So, what can we see here in terms of transits and progression? So, there's a few things happening. So, you might remember when they met, there was the Mars Uranus signature. This time we get the Venus Uranus signature. So, Mars might symbolize the sudden onset of passion and infatuation and those types of things. And now we've got Venus in Scorpio. So maybe the more binding, connective qualities. I mean, Mars and Venus are kind of two sides of a similar coin, very, very much different in their approach. But we do have, the relationship signature coming together. Now, not Venus, Uranus can also represent things that are sudden, that are quick, that can be shocking, disruptive, and even controversial. And there was many layers to this relationship that were a little bit outside of the status quo. So that has certainly been activated when they met, and then of course when they engaged. One thing I do notice about charts, relationship charts, I do have a Mars, Venus, Uranus type of signature, that there can be sudden onset of attraction and chemistry, and it's very electric and intensifying. And all this was happening in Scorpio too, mind you. So it adds a little bit, maybe a touch of taboo or forbiddenness to it. So that can be the excitement, the salty stuff, the sort of the spicy is not salty, spicy, but it can also be a bit erratic, on again, off again, maybe rushed, maybe dynamics of hot and cold. Obviously, in the throes of a new relationship, those more negative qualities may not have come through, but I could pretty much guarantee they are there now. Now, on the engagement, you will also see that Jupiter is um, squaring her sun. So the sun and Jupiter are very much royal planets. They're big. The sun might be the king, and the Jupiter is the wise priest type of that sort of sagely sort of energy. When transiting Jupiter comes along and squares your sun, it is really asking you to overstretch, break your nature. It's a transit where you have to give a lot. It's worthwhile a lot of the time, but it is having to, break your nature is probably um, one of the big key signatures of it. Spiritually, of course, Jupiter is a very spiritual planet. Breaking your nature or stretching yourself is really good for the soul, not so great for the ego. And we've already kind of touched a little bit on the condition of the sun there. Interesting too, when the engagement was announced, Mars was conjunct her natal Pluto. So certainly a signature that the royal family, whether it's skeleton in the closet, whether there's a spanner in the works of Libra and how things might appear, there's like a wrench has been put in place here. The deal has all but been sealed at this point, announcing a royal engagement. We can also see that the transiting node is 17 degrees of Leo, so it's coming fast for her sun. And all the while we have that, that energy of the nodes being activated, a nodal return, and then of course the squaring to Jupiter. So there's just kind of nodal Jupiterian energy that just makes everything very big, very fast. And it was massive at the time. If you cast your mind back to when they were announcing their engagement. Of course, there was a lot of controversy at many levels around it. And then by the time we get not even 6 months later, the big day happens, and that was May 19 of 2018. So I'm just going to move to there. So the wedding day, May 19, 2018. So here we have, there's quite a few things to talk about. So eclipses are a big part of this cycle. So we have the node is, it's past the sun at this point. It actually happened about a month prior to the wedding, particularly when the press, the tabloids would have been alive and well at that time leading up to the wedding, and all of the speculation about what she's going to wear and, all of the things that happen. And then on the other side, we've got, Mars and the South Node forming some alignments here. And if you can cast your mind back to that period of time, it was later that month in May that Mars stationed retrograde, and it went over her natal South Node and her progressed moon, which was very close at the wedding. It was at the last degree of Capricorn and going to move into Aquarius and her eighth house and stir up the South Node. And that can be a tricky progression to have. So there's a lot going on there. We can also see that Saturn is in the mix. So Saturn is in Capricorn, but from memory, it didn't oppose the Sun until the end of that year. But we can sense that there's, pressure, there's responsibility. We've got Mars and the nodes and the Sun, and then we've got Mars Saturn activations. Um, we've also got the secondary progressed Mars has conjoined her Mercury at this point. Now, keep in mind, Mars does move very slow by progression, but it has hit the degree at this point. It hadn't hit the degree on her engagement. 6 months later, it actually ticked over to just prior 6 months later, it ticked over into the fifth degree there. And a big part of Meghan's complaints was that she wasn't heard, that she wasn't, didn't have a voice, she couldn't do things the way that she saw fit, the way that she wanted to. So, anyway, whatever you think about that, whatever, but it's definitely there in the stars for sure. So, and then to add to all of that, wait, there's more. Uranus has just moved into Taurus. So Uranus was also squaring all of this stuff. So it was a very volatile period collectively, this Mars retrograde with the South Node. And that can bring up a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, things that are deeply buried within you. And she probably couldn't express that in the way that she needed or wanted to because of the situation she found herself in. So Uranus is just destabilizing all of that. It's, maybe making things clear, a more stark reality of what's not stable, the anger that bubbling up to the surface, and the patterns and things are coming exposed at this point in time. This is the wedding. It was after the wedding where some of these themes really started to play out. And this is all in May. And then by the time she gets to August, she's in a sun perfection. And so that's when all of, that energy just really gets turned on as well. You might also be looking at Neptune and thinking to yourself, oh, okay, well, has it passed? Um, it has made a pass to her natal Venus, but basically the 2018 year was when Neptune was going back and forward over her natal Venus. And so it would have been a confusing period for her having this fairy tale, right? Taking place, but then having all of these really hard and jarring aspects taking place at the same time. So throughout that year, she might have sort of gone, Neptune transits, they feel like waves. One minute you're thinking, oh my God, I'm so in love. This is the best thing ever. And then there'll be other situations where you're thinking, oh my God, what have I done? So Neptune continues and it stations direct in November of 2018 and it continues through December and then, clears the natal degree. And then she's home and hosed as far as Neptune's concerned. That transit's done. But I mean, again, it's a signature of a fairy tale. In my professional opinion, I've seen it too many times. Neptune is something you don't want. Um, you know, I always say this as a caveat, be cautious when you're dealing with new relationships and Neptune's in the mix. Is she the instigator of the deception and the smoke screens and the untruths and presenting herself in a light that's not accurate? I'll leave that to you, and I'm sure the future will reveal all. Or was this just some fantasy she got caught up in? And the idea of marrying a prince? I mean, who could blame a girl? But you get the picture, right? It definitely fits the archetype. So anyway, by the time Neptune has cleared the Venus stuff, and remember that Venus also rules the fourth house and her husband and what she's married into. And so, I guess one way you could look at that is that one woman's palace is another woman's prison, to be fair. Now, if we fast forward this a little bit to the mighty Megxit. I'll never forget learning about Megxit. It was surreal checking social media, and there was this announcement, not from the official channels of Buckingham Palace, but from her social media page. Talk about Mars, Mercury, just foot and mouth, or saying your words prematurely. And it was just this announcement that they were going to be stepping down as, senior royals, I think the words were at the time. And so she definitely, the marriage, the partnership definitely got Saturn Plutoed, which was a big signature of 2020. Of course, by this stage, eclipses had come through into her first and seventh house. So the North Node will tend to suggest that this is energy where the person has to focus on them, their desires, their wants. And the node has not long ago passed over Mars, the ruler of her career. So she was obviously, I would read that as very frustrated and very not happy about, you know, cutting ribbons or attending different things that royal people do. I mean, I would say she could have done a lot if she had have earned her stripes. It's the tradition, it's the way it is. But anyway, um, yeah, so eclipses, had all of those Capricorn energies happen at the beginning of 2020. We all remember what that was about. Of course, the South Node, Jupiter, just making all of that drainage, depletion, and a sense of loss, really pertinent for her. Also, keeping in mind, this wasn't just about um, Harry, the husband. All of this Saturn ruled energy is about her getting away from the family she married into as well. So, you could break that down in many different ways. So I remember looking at her chart at that time and thinking, okay, well, there's nothing particularly um, remarkable transit-wise coming up for her for quite a while. And I really had my eye on back then when Neptune would come into Aries, Saturn would come into Aries. And I thought to myself then, yep, that's when there will be a little bit of difficulty for her. I mean, she's had some difficulties along the way, the last, what, 5 years, coming up for 6 years now. There's been some hits and there's been some misses. There's been a couple of kids in there too. So I won't go through all of those details, but I wanted to give you a bit of a backdrop on some of the big things, their meeting, their engagement, the wedding, and Megxit, a lot in a short period of time, really. So let us go forward now to the present moment. So she has had some challenging introductions, let's say, to the Saturn Neptune journey in Aries. So where are we now? We'll leave it there, 6th of November. Today is the 4th as I'm recording it. So if we just actually push this forward a little bit to when Saturn and Neptune start to activate her birth chart again. So we will have Saturn and Neptune come back into Aries from February next year. They will make their conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. This will be a bit of a challenge for her, in my opinion, because we're going to have a few things happen in 2026 for Meghan. So we will have, let's have a look. So many notes. Where to start with this? So essentially, when you think about Meghan's natal chart, she has an exalted Saturn. And yes, it's her Saturn, it's her chart. But sometimes what happens in astrology, particularly if you're partnered with somebody or married to someone, hey, Winston, not now's not the time, mate. That's my cat. So what happens sometimes when you're married or you're in partnership with somebody, whatever happens to your seventh house or the ruler of the seventh house happens to them. So we've had some talk of, there's dramas with Prince Andrew right now. And so if I think his royal titles have been stripped of already, I believe, I'm not sure. I've heard that. And so that sets a precedent that will probably make it a little bit easier for the same to be done to Harry. So essentially, if the current sitting king can do that to his brother, the next sitting king, which will be William, can do it to his. So a precedent's been set. And so by the time Meghan actually gets a hit to that that midheaven, that will happen in May. And that is going to set off her midheaven May, September, October of 2026. And then she'll get another one in February of 2027. So that's, not going to be a very, you know, I don't think it's going to be very much fun for her because if you think about it, her natal Saturn is exalted in Libra, and that's the position her husband holds. He's a duke now. He's not a prince anymore. But then, through virtue of transit, what can happen to the seventh house or its ruler? It's going into fall. So we could see that over the course of this period of time, Harry could potentially lose his titles. Um, on those dates that I said, May, September, October, February of 2027. Maybe I can do a follow-up video looking more closely at his chart. Um, as a follow-up to this and see if we can get a bit more clarity of exactly when. Then, of course, Neptune's in the mix as well. Neptune's obviously a whole lot slower. So, not much is going to happen with Neptune, but just the co-presence is going to be perhaps a sudden loss, maybe some confusion, not knowing what's going to happen. One thing is for certain, though, Neptune is going to, as will Saturn, it will oppose the moon. Saturn will do it first, and then, of course, I think that will be about February, March, and then Neptune will do that through the course of 2026. That's tough on the moon, period, but it's also tough. It's her ascendant ruler. So we could see maybe a fall from grace, discombobulation, confusion around who am I or what am I doing, and things of that nature. Saturn is also going to trine the sun from its position of fall. Neptune will take longer to do that, but you might recall the relationship began when Saturn from Sagittarius trined the sun. And Saturn in Sagittarius doesn't have any special qualities to it. It's peregrine, so no harm, no foul kind of thing. When they married, Saturn was in Capricorn, nice and strong. And then, of course, now it's fallen. So this could literally be that for Prince Harry or the Duke of Sussex, and then, of course, her as well. Yes, there's Jupiter in the mix. That might be a little bit of a bolstering situation, maybe a life raft, some kind of support. Obviously, she's got deals and things going on and different businesses and things. Could also make the blowout a whole lot bigger. Now, the thing that I really wanted to bring to your attention is the secondary progressions. Now, by the time Meghan goes through these Saturn transits, what will happen is she will have these Saturn transits, and at the same time, so say let's go to, a year from now, Saturn will be all over her stuff. But look at what's happened to her secondary progressed midheaven and the moon, which is also her ascendant ruler. They are conjoined the fixed star of Algol. So again, it's a funny thing with relationships. Relationships can, the way they start is often the way that they'll end. So you might remember the secondary progressed Venus was conjoined speaker. Now the midheaven, this is her public identity. This is how she's known in the world. She's going to go through approximately a 3-year journey professionally or in the public eye. That journey will start more officially once that midheaven clicks over to 26. And let's just check out when that will be. 26. So we're looking at, April 2027. So just after the Saturn stuff happens and she's kind of cleared of a lot of that drama, um, this will happen. And now this will be a very difficult year for her. I would imagine that will be, this whole period when we're looking at secondary progressions, especially with the midheaven, there's a lead up for 1 year, then there's the events of that year, and then there's the sort of fading out of that year. This is going to be a difficult year for her. This will be her annulus horribilis as far as her reputation, her public identity is concerned. Even the Queen had one of these. I think the year was 1992, and nearly all her kids got divorced. That's a big deal when you're the queen. And then one of her favorite palaces caught on fire. So, we can see that a period of Saturn transits is going to be very difficult for Meghan. Add the secondary progressed career on the most notorious of all of the fixed stars that can sometimes bring up a lot of difficulty, particularly around feminine energy, around rage, around kind of look, I could go on a whole tangent about Algol, but there is this idea with Algol that there is a lot of malefic energy there. Now, there's already been whispers about her and the Epstein stuff, so maybe things will be laid bare there. We don't know, okay? But we do know astrologically that there's a lot of difficulty coming up for her during that period. Not only that, we can also see that the nodes are now in opposition to where they were when they married. So this is definitely churning things up. It's making things difficult. The nodal cycles will bring repetitive karma, repetitive patterns, and things of that nature coming through. We have transiting Uranus. Remember, Uranus was a big signature in the meeting and in the engagement. And Uranus is going to be trining her moon, which is her ascendant ruler. So, it's a lot. So, anyway, and that's a lot of data there. So, for some of you, you might need to rewind and go back over it. I've tried to go through this material kind of quick for you. Obviously, for some, it'll be going over your head a little bit. For some, you'll be like able to follow it fine. But if this is something you're interested in and learning how to do all of this stuff and bring meaning and bringing the stars alive in real people's lives, I would love to have you in the Contemporary Astrology Program Year 1. And I'll have a link below where you can learn more about the program, read a few testimonials, and I would love to teach astrology to you and go on this journey together starting December 10. All right, bye for now. And of course, I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and your opinions about the Meghan Harry sitch below. And I look forward to catching you in the next video.